All right, good evening. So give it a couple minutes here. All right, I see I got people watching. So welcome everybody. While we are waiting, I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a real quick look at, here's what we're gonna talk about tonight. We're gonna be going into BDC reticles versus MRAD reticles and how they affect things in a general purpose rifle. We'll probably touch on precision rifles too. I have a little curveball we're gonna throw into that. But while we're waiting, I'm gonna bring up a little fun item, if you will. So on your computer, on your phone, on whatever, you can go to this website, menti.com. It's going to ask you for a code. Go ahead and enter that code into the little text box. This is totally private, secure. Don't worry, it is anonymous. I'm not collecting anything. This is kind of just more for fun to interact with each other. So I'll give you all about 30 seconds. I'll keep a little link up on the top so you can find this as we keep going. See, hello, Joe, Dice Man, hello, Western Rifleman, all right, good, getting people going. All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide here. So in the box, it should change the window here. Go ahead and type in where you're watching from. Please be clean. I'm not gonna say we're family friendly here, but don't get me in trouble. Oklahoma. This is a word cloud exercise. If you're just joining, there is, again, that menti.com at the top. Use that code and you can join in. I have another question after this. This is just a warm-up as we get into the swing of things. While we're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Matt Robertson, and I am the Everyday Marksman. So my website, everydaymarksman.co, is all about learning tactical skills for living a more adventurous life. And I'm a former military officer turned tech sector corporate grunt, outdoors enthusiast, shooting enthusiast, and all around just kind of a nerd about everything. So the Everyday Marksman is all about teaching everyday people to live better, more adventurous lives through military skills. And that's a passion of mine. I hope you can understand that. I see Idaho is in the house. Welcome. So tonight we're going to be getting into a little bit of an optics debate over things. So when I talk about optics debate, I've got two experts who you saw in the show note, the show cards at the beginning. We've got Ilya Koshkin, the Dark Lord of Optics, and Jeff Gurwitch, longtime veteran of United States Special Forces. And we're going to put these two gentlemen in a corner on their own about where they take a stand. So it's going to be interesting. We are, of course, going to have some Q&A the last 20, 30 minutes or so. So I do expect this whole thing to take about an hour. All right, I see the numbers going up. People who are watching the stream, welcome. While we're waiting to get going, I have a little slide here. Let us know where you're coming from. Go to this menti.com, type in the code, and then you can put it in the word cloud, let everybody know where you're coming from. Pew Pew Archives, where is the Darth Lord? He is hiding in the wings of the stage at the moment. We'll bring him on in a second. All right, so got a couple answers here. I think people got the idea. So we're gonna go to the next question. And these are sliders. So within your slider, go ahead and pick how you feel, how much you agree with each of these. Speed more important than precision, simplicity over capability, and my favorite of this one is pie superior dessert to cake. Go ahead and enter what you think. So far, got everybody agreeing on all the way to the left. Say I'd play some music here, I'll probably get a copyright strike. I'll hold off for now. Give it a couple more minutes. It's filtering in. Once again, go to the top up here. Yeah, see, Pew Pew is trying to throw in some nuance here. Yes, I agree with you. This does depend on the problem you're trying to solve. We're going to get to that. But just as a broad answer, how well do you agree with these statements? All right, seems like we're getting some pretty good distribution now. So about split on pie versus cake. While Ilya and Jeff are on the wings, I'm going to ask you guys. I was going to ask you when you guys come on. How about that? And I see speed is more important than precision for your use, and simplicity. Actually, sorry, I'm saying speed is not as important as precision, but simplicity is better than capability. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all for participating in that one. So we got the topic of the day introduced. Doug, evening, welcome. All right, so I'm going to bring up the agenda for the night. So back to it. This topic is about bullet drop compensating reticles against MRAD or more precision reticles. Ilya is going to correct me on this one when he comes on. This sparked from a conversation that Jeff Gurwitch and I had on a podcast episode several weeks ago, where Jeff proudly stated that BDC is the way to go, especially for a general purpose rifle. And when I posted this in my Discord server, Ilya, being Ilya, you know him, we love him, said, I don't agree with that, and I think it's wrong. So I've also invited Ilya on to tell us why we're wrong about that. And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Now, we all understand there is some nuance to this topic. It does, as Pew Pew Archives pointed out, there is a balance here. It does depend, that's not what you asked. There we go. It does depend on your use and the problem you're trying to solve. So yes, I agree with that, and we're going to discuss that as we get into it. But we are now 6 minutes in, and we're going to go ahead and get going. So first up, I'm going to introduce Jeff Gurwitch. Let's bring him on, and this away, and here we go. Jeff, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then we'll switch to Ilya introducing himself, and then we'll get on with the debate.
All right, Jeff Gurwitch, retired SF guy, 19 years in SF, 26 years in the regular Army. I did a bunch of tours in Iraq and Afghanistan in the heydays of, all the good times with the rules of engagement and the fighting and all that. And now I basically just started running my own YouTube channel, give a little plug, Modern Tactical Shooting. And I just started offering training under my own name. I've trained under some other outfits, but it's time to go it alone.
All right, thank you, Jeff. All right, now we're going to bring on Ilya. You all know the Dark Lord of Optics. Ilya, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, I am a professional Monday night quarterback. I do this exceptionally well, better than most. But all jokes aside, I'm an optics guy. I have my primary expertise is targeting and imaging systems, more from the nerdy engineering side than anything else. But it does bring a somewhat different point to this discussion, so this should be fun.
All right, thank you, Ilya. So let's get started. Round one, Jeff, you get the floor. I'm going to give you a few minutes here to state your case about why BDC is the way to go for a general purpose rifle.
All right, so BDCs. Well, hands down, we can say right now, the JM Pro BDC that comes in a Vortex is one of the most winningest reticles in 3-gun. But competition aside, I prefer the BDC in the context of battle rifles, whether it's 5.56, you have a 500-meter gun. You're rocking 7.62, you basically have an 800-meter gun. A BDC, if you know your holds, can be almost just as accurate enough to get hits at those distances on man-sized targets. And more importantly, I think it's faster once you get those holes. Instead of sitting there trying to count, MRAD lines, MILRAD lines, you do have that simple hold. And in combat, you're under the enemy's time exposure that he gives you. So if you're in a DMR role where you're set up in a position, yes, you can range stuff, get solid ranges, range buildings. So when the enemy pops out, you've been waiting for him to ambush him, a mil reticle will work great. But if you're, a soldier out patrolling, reacting to contact, you're now on the enemy's time and the exposure that they give to you. And BDC, hands down, is the faster of the two, types of reticles because it is simple. You throw your quick hold because, again, if the enemy pops up with that limited exposure, your range estimating, you're guessing anyways. So having a super precise optic is not going to help with a fancy reticle because you're guessing on the range. So hopefully you're within at least 25, 50 yards. You snap that BDC up there, and if you know your holds, hopefully you get close enough to get that hit. And if you don't get that hit, at least hopefully you can see the splash in your reticle as you're viewing at that target for a quick correction and then put rounds on target. And that's why in competition, BDCs are the way to go for 3-gun style matches, which I've shot big 3-gun matches, and the farthest you normally shoot is out to 500 yards. We're not talking man-sized targets. We're talking LaRue size, C-zone plates, 8-inch plates. So there's a big accuracy factor there. It's a lot harder to hit a 6-inch plate at 450 yards than it is a man-sized target. But, BDCs have proven to be the winning type reticle in 3-gun. Now, if we did a PRS match where you're shooting out, out 6, 8, 1,000 yards, and you're shooting, like, say, 6-inch plates at 1,000 yards, yes, BDC is probably going to fail you. It cannot be accurate enough. You'll need that MRAD reticle, that mill reticle to get your exact hold. But normally in that setting, before you shot the match, you had time to plan out your ranges within your reticle, write down your holds and all that. In combat, you don't have that time. Again, you're on the enemy's time in a lot of cases, unless you've been set up in a pre-positioned area where you've already ranged everything out. You get your wind calls, you have everything set, and your zero is set for that area. None of this means anything if you zero your gun in North Carolina at Fort Bragg and then you deploy to Afghanistan without a re-zero anyways. You're going off of hopes and dreams with 8,000 feet of elevation changes, temperature changes. So you're not going to be that accurate to begin with, no matter what type of scope you're using. So you do have to, hopefully, when you get on the ground somewhere, running a BDC or, a fancier type optic, shoot out to the distances that you expect to engage. And one way to make a BDC faster, and you've seen it on buttstocks of guys' guns, and I do this for 3-gun matches, is I print out a copy of my reticle and I shoot my optic for the true ranges, and I just annotate my exact holds for those real ranges. So I'm not having to memorize numbers or anything like that. I'm just visualizing the holds I need. So this makes it plenty fast and accurate enough for me. And there is a VCOG reticle. That's what I rocked in 2015 at my last tour. I rocked a 6-power VCOG, and it served me well. I kept it on 6-power the whole time. I had offset red dot. But honestly, the closest target that presented to me that tour was probably around 200 yards, maybe 100 at the closest. But really, I was engaging farther threats with my VCOG at the time. But solid reticle, and it works good enough. And again, with a good BDC, it's built into range too, either usually off the shoulders of a guy or the height of a guy. You can get a rough range estimate if it's built into the BDC. So that's another one I give towards the BDC. It has built-in range estimation in a lot of the reticles, so that can work in your favor.
Okay, thank you. All right, Jeff, you kind of started torpedoing your own argument there. That was put aside.
Well, I mean, obviously there's uses for, a mill reticle and things like that, but for speed and good enough accuracy, if you know what you're doing, that's why I think BDC is where it's at.
All right, thank you. All right, Ilya, you are up. State your case.
All right. So I promised to vociferously complain about Matt's duplicity, but we don't have too much time, so I'll keep it short. So when Matt came onto this Discord server and said, BDC, yeah, I didn't say you should be using precision reticles instead, and I didn't say that you guys were wrong. I said that you were both right and wrong. And the argument of the precision reticle never came up. The argument was BDC versus milliradian delineated reticle. Jeff's argument about BDC basically having known holes that you can correlate to the distance you think you see with your eyes, assuming you can estimate the distance accurately enough for speed, is absolutely the way to go. My argument is that if you're going to be doing that, there is no compelling reason why you cannot be using a somewhat similar looking milliradian delineated reticle, because if you are careful on how you sight this, and this is actually not the best example, but it is a milliradian reticle. A good example of such a reticle is the G1 reticle, the new Steiner P4XI. That's a 1-4 scope that just did a different reticle. And that one has milliradian delineated holes. So for shits and giggles, I just ran on using JBM ballistics, somewhat generic 62 grain 556 bullet, 3,000 foot per second, 2,000 foot elevation. Played a little bit with the sight in, and it turned out that my 300-yard hold is exactly half a milliradian. My 350-yard hold is exactly 1 milliradian. 400-yard hold is 1.4 milliradian. 450-yard hold is 2 milliradian. I was at 600 is 4 milliradian exactly. So you get your milliradian scale with your normal primary aiming point horseshoe, whatever you like. Mess a little bit with the sight, and this particular sight is 225 yards. And use and out through the distances where you'd be using a BDC, what did you say, Jeff, 500 yards or so, thereabouts. You can use a milliradian reticle just fine as a BDC. This is the difference between LPVO milliradian reticle and a precision reticle. Nobody's saying take a 3 reticle from the tangent theta and put it in a low power variable. That would be preposterous, right? But you can make a reticle that will work as a BDC at the ranges where you're going to shoot it as a BDC, while giving you some additional reference points when you're shooting further away. Once again, to turn Jeff's example back on his head, when you're shooting a little bit further, you think you're close, you're a little bit off, and you do the correction. One of the key problems with every single BDC reticle out there, oh, by the way, other than, so if you guys saw these, a discussion about Tacom's new quote-unquote master reticle, I don't know if you guys saw that. So I'm friendly with the Tacom guys. I'll do a live show on this. I signed an NDA with them, so they sent me their patent disclosure, and I looked at it. It's a very different way of thinking about BDC, and it's actually smarter than the current BDC reticles. Matt, could you bring up that Trigicon reticle again?
The Trigicon? Okay.
Yeah.
Second. I can do that.
Here's the basic problem with this. Up close, if you look at this versus a conventional mid-radial reticle like the one in the Stein or something like that, and just for record, the reticle Matt chose to show this was designed to set me up. Never trust an Air Force guy. I mean, during his military career, he had ICBMs aimed at me, like personally. I am not taking that very well. But anyhow, look at this. So
It's business.
Yeah. I'm joking. I'm older than Matt. By the time he was manning anything explosive, I was already here. Look at the spacing between the hash marks, 8, 9, 10, wide ass spacing, right? When you start doing your corrections, you don't have that much working with. And if you're good, and Jeff is clearly good, and I'm not going to tell Jeff how to serve and how to shoot. You have very few reference points, and your brain is not good in making small incremental corrections. Your brain is incredibly good in finding the middle between 2 visible hash marks. You see, that's how human vision works. And if you look at the stuff closer to the center, you notice that the hash marks are almost equidistant from each other, the 4 and 5 and 3, right? The distances look very similar because it's almost a milliradian reticle, except they screwed it up a little bit. They all do. With the right sight in, you have your milliradian hashes. Works just like any normal BDC. This cheat card, Jeff, that you have, where you are running ballistic calculator to figure out which hash mark does what. You can do this with anything, right? So you can do it with a periodic milliradian reticle. And then when you're guesstimating, trying to make corrections at longer distance, you actually have more reference points to work with when you're trying to figure out how much to correct, where you saw the impact, and what you're going to work with. So the argument I'm making is not that BDC is wrong. BDC is a great idea, and it works great. The argument I'm making is that the BDC-specific reticles that are specific for particular ammo are only wrong in one situation, and because the hash marks are not periodic, trying to adjust to them is a little bit of a mess. Is it doable? Yeah. It absolutely is, but it is easier with a milliradian delineated steps. Okay. You guys with me? Make sense? Or should I continue making fun of Matt? I'll be happy to. One of my favorite things to do online.
No, please no. I've had enough. I submit.
All right.
Just kidding. All right, no. All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to go to the next piece of this. And I saw a couple of questions coming in that I think are worth addressing here. So first one goes PPU archives. So BDCs are for possibly lesser experienced and time-trained individuals if it's an issue. So I think this kind of flies in the face of what Jeff said, because you are not a lesser trained or experienced individual. So I don't know if you have a response to that.
Well, I think if you're going to throw an object out to the masses, like my experience with SF, and they gave us the LCAN 1-4 when it first came out, it's a great idea to give everybody a BDC because it is half the training time. And so you're not having to give a class on how to, read MRADs or mil dots or whatever. So it's again, for the average masses, I think a BDC is a great way to go. Now, like with anything, can somebody outgrow a BDC and be like, this is not enough for me, I want something more? Sure, by all means. And for instance, I ran a VCOG. I had a buddy, he ran a Leopold, and he had, reticles in his. But he was more on the, I would say, marksmanship side, precision-wise. And, he was comfortable with that. I just ran the BDC because, again, I was thinking it was, simpler.
Now, one of the things I also saw here, Link wrote this one. BDC is calculated for one specific load, and if you use it on anything else, that's not true. So this is actually interesting. So I do have my my TA 110 sitting in front of me. This is the LED 3.5. One of my favorite scopes, though it's a little bit heavy for what it is. But so the interesting thing about this one is I actually bought the 7.62 version for the M240, though I shoot it on a 16-inch 5.56, where I primarily shoot 77 grain out of it.
Yeah, it's gonna match almost perfectly out to about 450, 500,
right.
475, something like that.
So I think that the good point here is that yes, I do think a BDC is typically calculated for like a specific load at a specific velocity. But often it's close enough to other things, but I think there can be wild variations on that.
Okay, so a couple of things to address also. So Jeff's point is military use. Military does not usually, best I can tell, have 8 million different types of ammo, right? That's more of a civilian problem. For people like me, I've got, I don't know, 200,000 rounds of ammo in my garage, and they're all different. It's easier for me to adjust to different types of ammo, but for the military world, I don't know if that is a specific problem. Chant has another good question. You see the last one, Matt?
This one. Oh, was it this one?
Yeah. So a lot of my complaint here is probably not so much with what Jeff said, but with how most companies design their BDC reticles. Yes, you can make hybrid BDC reticles. I've designed one that's going to be in a scope about 4 or 5 months ago. So this argument is not random. I've actually spent quite a lot of time thinking about this and running a large number of ballistic calculations. I've got, I don't know, probably half a gig of different spreadsheets of ballistic calcs. What happens is that if you really run the ballistics on all these marginally similar bullets, until you get past 550 or so, they're easily within the error of hitting, well, let's say an 18-inch plate. How about that? Something size of
my VCOG zeroed with 62 grain. Basically, I was flip-flopping between a 14-inch gun, 5.56, and a 308. And yeah, they lined up almost the same out to about 600. Didn't notice much of a difference at all.
Yeah, like it's 600, it's a few inches off.
Yeah, 55 grain VCOG reticle is what I had in the gun too. So I was running 62 grain with 55 reticle.
Yeah, and the fun thing is that comparatively small difference in sight and make it match at distance much better. With all the different BDCs and stuff, when I test scopes, I get all sorts of real kooky reticles. I basically give up and I go and zero them at 500 with whatever hole is supposed to be there, and everything closer in is close enough, right? If I'm shooting steel, because what happens is that if I'm zeroed at 100 or 200 or 250 or 260, right, anything in of that is still within this, right? It's a couple inches off. Shooting steel really does not make any difference.
So a lot of the takeaways I'm having from this one is it really depends a lot on what you're shooting at just as much. You have to, like, how precise do you need it to be versus, like, I hate to use the phrase combat accurate, where it's center mass generally, or does it need to be like a 3-inch thing at 200 yards?
Well, so one thing I'll bring up, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're using a scope like this, I'm going to go ahead and assume that shooting off a mosquito's left testicle at 800 yards is not what you're trying to do. You want to do that? It's a very, 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 very different tool. Use this. And that's going to be different reticle, different everything. My basic assumption, if we're talking low power variables and gas guns, you want to hit within the target that's the size of vitals of a human-sized creature. Let's go with that. Right. Is that reasonable, Jeff?
Yes. Now I will, on behalf of the BDC owners of the world, point out two things. If you bring up that VCOG reticle one more time, if you bring, and I mentioned it, VCOG, if you go into an unknown, okay, you land in that field, you jump out of that helicopter, you're going to the unknown, you don't have time for that range estimation. If you look at the VCOG, that is width of their shoulders, those horizontal lines on max magnification. So if you don't have time to range estimate, if his width of the shoulders, say, touch both lines of the 6, you know he's around that 600. And another thing that BDCs have over practical use of, say, MRADs, and I've tried it. Trying to count MRAD lines or mill lines under pressure, because usually they're a lot finer in the optic tube, impossible. So out of a PRS match where the pressure is only the clock, the pressure is not people maneuvering on you or you having to maneuver on people, it's almost impossible to sit there and try and count fine mill lines to get that exact hold. I'm telling you, because don't forget the stressors of combat, we talk about tunnel vision and things like that. Obviously, you can get accustomed to it. The pressure is still there. So the human factor, yes, more accurate. Mill dots, mill lines, MRADs, way more accurate. But you've got to insert the human model into it and how we react. And that's why I think BDCs equate to general use, the go-to, because your brain can process it better.
Well, I mean, that's a straw man argument, right? Because I just said we're not talking about precision reticles. Trying to send a picture to Matt of the reticle in this scope, it's called a G1 reticle, because it's a mill delineated reticle and it has the same shoulder width ranging thing, except it's matched to milliradian holds. Your argument's perfectly valid, but it's an argument about reticle design, not about milliradian. There are plenty of milliradian delineated reticles and low power variable scopes, EBR9 and the Razor Gen 3, the reticle and this guy and a bunch of others that will do all the same ranging, quick estimation thing. And one of my big complaints with them is that they do, if they aim them at an AR-15, you can mark it in a way that's really apparent, right? You can, let's say, mark milliradian on one side and distance where appropriate on the other side a couple of times. And once again, I have a similar design coming out because up close, the milliradian holds match your BDC and match it really, really remarkably closely. Okay, you do not have to give up your BDC to use a milliradian-based reticle and a low-power variable or a prismatic.
So something I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit here because this topic has come up about precision BDCs and I intentionally captured this one. So this is the primary arms Apollo, which is a BDC. And
I'm going to have fun with that one.
So that's why I wanted to bring this one up because I feel like this is now trying to bridge these two worlds. If I'm thinking of a PRS match where I'm going to dial and do all kinds of things or use the tree below it, this is totally it seems different to me than what I would expect to do. And this is also meant to general purpose. I think this is a 308 and 6.5. So are we in a new era of reticle design now, or is this just off the wall?
Jeff, you want to take this one while I look for a file to send to Matt, and then I'll address it?
Well, I think this reinforces the statement I was trying to make. So now there's a guy maneuvering on you, and you're sitting there trying to count those super thin lines. Are those super thin lines or dots really super accurate? Yes, they probably are. But under pressure, that's kind of busy. Is it accurate? I bet you it is. But for a general purpose gun, that might be, I think many might find it too busy to be practical, to be fast. That's why, again, I'll throw the JM Pro out there. It's a simple reticle, and it's dominated in 3-gun for a long time just because it's so simple and fast.
Ilya.
All right. So, Matt, I finally figured out how to upload the reticle to our Discord. It's when you have a chance, grab it. In the meantime, so first of all, this is not a milliradian reticle, this is a BDC reticle. And I'm generally very friendly with primary guys, but I think this is a stinking, steaming pile of manure.
Because it's not a good BDC or a good mill dot.
Yeah, it's a god-awful BDC.
It's not good
not easily adaptable because you're 7. God knows what this 7 is because at sea level, it's 700 yards. And where I live, that's probably 900 yards, but it's not a millrad. So unless I'm married to my ballistic calculator, I can't make this stupid thing work. And on top of it, the center is ultra thin and unnoticeable. I wrote a whole freaking series of articles for Guns and Ammo on reticle design. One of the things you want, and this is once again, I've never been in combat. I've worked very hard to make sure I'm never in combat. So self-preservation is strong in my family. One of the key things about reticle design, you have to have a primary aiming point, and it has to be very distinct, right? Because when you're freaking tired, when you've been staring through this thing for hours, your eye needs to be drawn to this primary aiming point. And in this particular design, and the guy who designed it, he's a smart guy. I don't know who came up with this nonsense. In this particular design, your eye will be drawn everywhere but where it's supposed to be drawn. This is just a terrible idea. One of the big reasons people use horseshoes and also other very noticeable reticle elements right there in the center is to make sure that you are visible. The reticle is visible, but also to make sure that your eye is drawn there when you're tired. It's the same thing about symmetry, the way human vision works. If you look at this particular reticle, see this rangefinder thing up top? It's a terrible idea. If you want to do range finding, integrate it into a primary stadia, and for the same reason. When you're tired, your eye will be attracted to this nonsense. That's one. Bigger problem is that the way human vision works, we have two eyes arranged horizontally. We don't care about top-down symmetry. We're used to see looking at different things above horizon, below horizon. That's how we process information. We like horizontal symmetry. If you want to aim, make your reticle horizontally symmetric. So if you take the right side and flip it to the left, it is the same. That silly range-finding nonsense screws this up. And if you are really, really tired, you try to shoot with these things, you will notice you will be consistently leaning one way because that's screwing up your perception.
So now you got me thinking about, I can't remember what it is now. There's one that's on the Steiner, the higher end Steiner, the M7. And notice
the MSR2?
Yes, the MSR2
Yeah.
reticle. And I've always wondered why it has some of these things on that seem like it's symmetrical. Like, I guess that's
the guys from Finakers who designed it, they're actually capable guys. For front focal plane precision reticles, oftentimes this is a little bit less of a deal, right? Because what happens is that as you get tired, you dial down the magnification. A lot of this stuff is sized to really disappear and not be noticeable at low power. So I spent a good amount of time designing reticles for different people. And this is a March 5-42 by 56. I designed a reticle for them called FMLTR1. It's a precision tree type reticle. With all the symmetries and all the other stuff I built in there, I sized the tree so that when you go down to about 10 or thereabouts, you don't see the tree. It looks like a duplex. And it's sized that way, not to prevent you from placing a shot. It's sized that way so that if you're tired, dial down magnification a little bit, and you've got a simple reticle to work with. Okay.
All right, I got your reticle up here.
There you go, Jeff. So this is a milliradian delineated reticle for a simple low power variable. It gives you 4 milliradians of hold. The bottom hash is 600 yards. The hash widths allow you the same type of ranging on the plate, shoulder width, whatever else. The wind holds on the horizontal line are in milliradian. They did a diamond, probably to be different. Diamond, circles, they all work. Here's a milliradian reticle for you. Does it look like a precision reticle?
I would say no. I wouldn't. I actually, at first glance, I would say that does not look like even a reticle.
There have been several similarly styled reticles out there. Hawk Frontier 126 has one, and there have been several others. Because the conditions are always different, your BDC will never be perfectly matched. So this will not be perfectly matched either. If you go through the trouble of figuring out where your BDC holds are, you can go through the trouble of figuring out what these hashes means, and it gives you everything else that you need. But if you get used to this, if you get used to holding with this milliradian, you go from scope to scope, and every milliradian reticle, your holds are the same. That's more of a civilian problem, right? If you get used to one particular BDC, JM1 or something like this, and for God knows what reason, different companies always make their BDCs slightly different. You get used to one, you have to relearn on the other. If you figure out your milliradian hold in a high visibility reticle, it translates to everything else.
So now we only got a couple minutes left in this piece of it, so we're going to get to the Q&A in a second. So now we get to the nuance piece. Obviously, there's not a right answer for everybody all the time.
Wait a second. It should be obvious. I'm right. You're all wrong. No? Oh, never mind.
To that, I'm going to say. All right. All right. So you're that guy who goes to the range and goes oh, I see what you're doing wrong, and tries to get really bad advice. You should do that for fun sometimes. Let's go to a public range and get people with bad advice.
Yeah, I don't think there is lack of bad advice. You can just go and observe.
Fair.
I spent years doing that in LA. People with $8,000 guns and $5,000 scopes mounted backwards. I've actually seen that once. Schmidt and Bender on an Accuracy International mounted backwards.
It's more accurate that way. It's a secret.
I don't even want to ask. All right, so we're going to get to the nuance piece of this then. If we could come up with some hard and fast rules for if we're trying to go to people and say, hey, you're new, and you're maybe a little bit past the new point, and you're trying to pick out what is it that you want to do as a new person. Best case, I want to see if you all agree on this. Best case for a BDC. What is your best example? Why would you suggest a BDC for somebody?
Shooting out to 500 and simplicity. They're still simpler. Even the reticle you just shown is still busy compared to most BDCs, and that's just a distraction from the information that you really need.
This reticle looks very busy because I sent you a picture with dimensions. You should try it in the scope. I disagree on that one. Full milliradian holes, smaller half milliradian holes. It's same level of complexity as most conventional BDC reticles. If you have a BDC reticle, it gives you 100-yard and 50-yard holes. We're looking at the same level of complexity.
But
if you take out the dimensions, that's what it's going to look like.
An average guy could pick up a BDC and think, oh, there's the 300-yard line. Whereas you got to know what a mil rad or mil dot is.
No, you don't. You can go to manufacturer and mark the holes with 300.
If you don't have a chrono and you don't have known ranges too, you're kind of like, all right, where am I at with this thing?
Okay, so the bottom hash is exactly 600 yards. One above it is exactly 550, right? So it matches. You can use a milliradian reticle as a BDC reticle. You don't have to know ballistics for this. Run the calculator. I can send you a spreadsheet.
So real quick, I saw this question pop up in the chat, but Ilya, it's on your channel, not mine, so I can't answer it through my chat thing. But I believe that was a Steiner P4XI Gen 2. Right?
Correct. P4XI, just before XI, they made a version with a different reticle. This is called a G1 reticle. I just have this is a scope that I happen to be playing with right now. It's end of the year. I'm trying to get a bunch of stuff out of here, so this is one of the ones I've been shooting with, and I found myself liking this thing a lot more than I thought originally. I generally prefer slightly differently styled reticles, and this thing just works great. It's a nice little scope.
All right, so continue to change the question, though. So when would you recommend a BDC to somebody, if ever? Ilya.
Who, me or Jeff?
Ilya.
Our point of contention is that you're differentiating between a BDC and milliradian reticles, and I'm making a point that a milliradian reticle like this is a BDC plus more, right?
So the answer is never then.
No, I think it's a terrible idea.
All right. So then go back to Jeff then. So kind of ask here, because I know where Ilya's standing on this one. When would you suggest someone start considering that MRAD style?
Well, we're here in the States, so if you're going to jump into PRS precision rifle shooting, BDC's going to let you down. If you're going to jump into 3-gun, though, BDC's the way to go. But any sort of high accuracy, long distance, then, going with an MRAD reticle is going to be better, especially if you're going to really, say, shoot out to 1,000. And you pair that with your ballistic calculators and things like that, yeah, you're going to get your accuracy. And that is, if I hit a 500-yard target with my AR and a BDC, I'm like, woo, good shot. I got it. That's my combat accuracy. Now, if I get my buddy who shoots PRS out here, he's literally going to shoot a 1-inch group at that 500-yard plate. Obviously, you can't do that with a BDC. You need something else. But I don't have any desire or need for that level of accuracy because, again, I'm retired now, so I'm not going to be thrown into harm's way. But for the style of competitive shooting that I do, a BDC works just fine. And, I haven't looked at price points lately, like if there's any real meaningful difference between a price of a BDC type scope. I mean, I own a VCOG. Damn thing's almost $2,000. It's got a BDC, so I guess not. But it's just simple for me. Yeah, $2,000. And it's a 1-to-6 now, so it's totally update. I need to get like a 1-to-8 or something, 1-to-10, step up my game. But I'm a simple guy, so again, I lean towards simplicity. So even that reticle which you showed looks pretty interesting. If you put that up next to the VCOG reticle, VCOG's still way simpler. So when I'm under pressure,
you should see the VCOG reticle with the dimensions on it. You'll change your mind.
I'm just saying. I'm just going off of those left and right mil-rad lines. Go off the left and right. They're meaningless to me. I just need the ones underneath to get my elevation holds. I don't need all the windage type stuff. So again, it's too busy for me.
So I'll get my take on here because I'm kind of on both ends of this one. I tend to think MRAD based reticles is what I put in my precision stuff.
Oh, I gotta go. I'll see you later.
But I understand Ilya's point here too, that if you're doing it in something like a 1-6 or a 1-8, and you understand your ballistic, I see a lot of convenience there of saying, I know my hold is always 1.2, and if you rehearse that as to where it becomes that instinctual thing that we've talked about in the past, and you know that, then it doesn't matter what scope you use. You know it's always 1.2, assuming everything is accurate. I see a lot of benefits of that. I think for the average person though, who I would say is like isn't a gun nerd, and you're just trying to say like, hey, I need you to as quickly as possible put shots on that target at some distance. I'm not telling you what it is. I can see the benefit there of using a BDC to do it. And that's what I've done in some classes where, I mean, it was like fire and maneuver stuff going out to 300 yards, and you didn't know. So all I could do was, in my LCAN at the time, was, all right, I'm going to guess, and then here we go. That's kind of my take on it. There's not one right answer, Ilya, but I think in general it's how.
Well, you know what I think about that.
And how fast you have to go. All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and pivot to the last bit here. We're going to get to some Q&A. So we're going to open this up to everybody. Everybody's in the chat. I see some questions coming in, or conversation's been going. So I'm going to throw on the overlay here. And all right, we can ask away. So let's go on. A couple questions come in, going back to Chen. And let's see. Going back. Been active chat. All right, there we go. Boom. All right, start with this one. And y'all are still watching this one, feel free to keep chatting. It'll pop up on the screen. Again, I do ask that you try to be polite. Typical rules. So I saw this one. I think it's interesting. I think my take is I don't know how practical that would be unless we're talking something with like a digital heads-up display, which has its own set of issues.
Want me to address it? You want to give it a shot?
You're the expert on this one.
Yeah, it exists. It's called a projected reticle, where they have an edge reticle. They project additional aiming points into it. It's a little bit expensive still, so it's more for the next generation machine guns, but it's going to make its way down to less expensive stuff. And the idea is for the scope to get direct input from a laser rangefinder or project a predetermined pattern. So that, but if the battery dies, you still have some sort of an etched pattern. The preferred method there is to basically have some sort of a simple milliradian reticle, then project a BDC on it if you need to. That specifically matches the caliber, atmospheric conditions, and all that sort of stuff. So that that kind of stuff is on the way. There are at least 3 companies I can think of that are doing it.
All right, good. So next one, I thought this one was also good. So given that a rifleman needs a master's firearm, I think it's advantageous to use the MRAD and adjust accordingly. Sounds like a vote for Ilya there. Yes. Jeff, what do you think?
I like to see them try and train all the soldiers on MRADs. The average soldier, even in SF, they're not gun guys. Not every commando that joins is a gun guy. A gun is a tool. It handles one problem, kill the enemy. But there's so many other tasks that have to be mastered, especially special operations, that the gun just keeps you alive while you're doing all these other tasks. So it might seem like an easy thing. Well, it's just MRADs. It's just one more thing you got to lay it on, and then it's one more thing you have to keep up with practice. Because it doesn't matter what optic you're using. If you don't practice, you're not going to be good anyways. So even just getting guys, and that's why I thought it was a super smart move with the LCAN to go with that BDC. And in third group, we had a marksmanship program that just taught that, but it was still a week long just to get guys dialed in on that. So to me, it's just one more layer you got to add on to it. Sure, if you're just a rifleman, like here's this rifle, you're going to carry this rifle. Okay, you have one job, be a rifleman. But in the military, there's so many other tasks besides shooting that gun. That gun just keeps you alive. There's so much other stuff you have to keep up with. That's kind of an excuse why are not all like commandos gun guys. Well, there's so many other hardcore specialties that have more importance that a lot of them, they just like, okay, I want something simple and I just want to, be able to go with it.
Okay, this is not going to sound good. So how many people total serve roughly in the Special Forces in the U.S.?
Well, if we're talking U.S. Army Special Forces, where there's probably about 5,000 or 6,000. We're not counting SEALs or Rangers or Delta. We're talking just Army SF. And you got to figure with attrition, you're probably getting 1,000 fresh guys every year and 1,000 guys leaving at least. So that 6,000 to 7,000 is fluctuating between levels of experience every year.
All right. So this is going to sound unpleasant. So should we be designing commercially available reticles for the 6,000 SF guys or for the 50 million people who just bought ARs because COVID hit?
Well, I'm not a scope designer. So obviously, if you're going for a military contract, then you've got to tailor it to that. And if you're a scope designer, this has to do with anything. If it's not intuitive, it's not going to work in combat. I don't care how badass it is. Because again, you got to go back to caveman thinking. You have not been under pressure until you're in the middle of somebody trying to kill you. Gun match pressure is not life and death pressure.
That's
so.
True.
As like designers out there, they might think they have the hottest thing going, but if it's not intuitive and it's counter instinctive or subconsciously doesn't jive with your natural threat response, it's not going to work no matter how badass it is. And I think that's what, and I see this a lot because I've tested products, get off on other things. I've tested a lot of products for defensereview.com. I did some product testing while I was in the Army on the job I did. And there's some stuff out there that might seem great, but then when you apply it to military type things, it fails miserably. There's so much junk out there the good idea fairy has come up with, and it just falls apart under military pressure.
That's a phrase I've not heard in years. Thank you for bringing it.
That's a good phrase.
What was that?
But you can't add military reticles to them because military buys those.
No. There's a whole line of, and there's a, trust me, if we drag all 6,000 SF dudes that are active right now, I'm sure there's a good 2,000 or 3,000 have killed plenty of dudes with some very complicated horse type scopes and things like that. I mean, the stuff works.
Oh, let's not start me on horse reticles. That's going to be a much longer discussion than you want.
I mean, I know a dude who made a 1,400 meter shot. Obviously you didn't use a BDC for that. So there's been some long. I think of stuff in terms of battle rifle. I carried an M4 at 308. I'm not looking to be a sniper, so I want to be on it out to the capability of my bullet. And with 5.56, no matter what you shoot out of, it's really a 500 meter bullet. So I want something to work in that realm. With an FN Scar, which I think is a great rifle, it's a 308. That's a 600 to 800 at the most gun. So I just need an optic to match it. I thought the Army at the time, the LCAN 1-6 was a good, smart choice for it. Not too big and not too much power. But, I'm a little dated now. I retired in 2017. So, things are moving on. But, that's, I guess, to wrap up how I think of things.
So I want to bring this question up here because I thought this one was interesting. Again, Chen, since we're talking BDC precision, dialing is already ruled out. I'll just throw it. I think dialing has its place when it comes to a precision orientation. And of course, you assume your scope is up to it. I think the last PRS match that I shot, I was all about dialing. I didn't even try to use the.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
I dialed elevation. I held.
You dial once and then hold off everything else because you don't have time to dial everything.
So, actually, I did. I didn't win. I finished in the top third, but I did dial for everything until I got to the. Actually, no, there's a couple I did do what you're saying. I dialed once and I would hold over under a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I dialed for every string, and then the only exception to that really was the bonus stage, which I did it with a 22, so it's the one here. It's hard to see, but the bonus stage went out to 485 yards. I ran out of elevation on the turret, so I dialed everything that scope had, and I had to hold another six mils. But I hit it.
So it so happens I know a lot of PRS guys. So the top shooters, every single one of them, they dial on every shot and hold for wind. That's basic for precision. That's a de facto thing. I don't really shoot that way, but I'm not a PRS guy. I'm a long range guy, but I'm not a PRS guy. So I tend to, within 500-600 yards, I tend to hold. Beyond that, I tend to dial. If I'm under time pressure, multiple plate something, I will dial to middle one and then hold under for stuff that's near there. But those guys are better shooters than I am, and I have seen other people shoot. Like I'm talking about guys like Phil Velayo and Kalen and all these guys. They know what they're doing, but they will also freely admit that that's not necessarily an ideal way to go for everything for everyone. The reason why most of these guys still use tree-type reticles, although they don't use the tree very much, is that they can all comfortably envision a situation where you do need that tree-type reticle. Holding with a reticle at 1,400 yards is generally not a good idea. There's a variety of optical reasons for that, just the way scopes are built and all that, and you don't want to be aiming that much away from the center if you can help it. The whole business with tremor reticles, Horus reticles in the military is that Mr. Handlebar Mustache, the snake oil salesman of the year, managed to convince the military that this whole idiotic tremor mess is going to cut down on training time, ruin the whole generation of precision shooters, who still do remarkable things despite that reticle.
Anyway, I think that was like that to me. That's a question. If it's precision oriented, I'm probably dialing. But if we're talking something more like what I was saying, inside 500 yards, and it's about speed, I could see not doing it. So this one is pew pew gas guns 308s.
Well, first of all, 308, it's not 1982 anymore. Can we just throw that out? I mean, come on. 308, really? It's a water hose. Even I have a 6.5 Grendel now, you know?
So you just made me change my plans.
Well, 6.5 Grendel has exterior ballistics nearly identical to the 308, out to about 950.
A third of the recoil does just as much damage, and it's a great 600-meter bullet. And
you don't have to convince me. I bought one of the first 10 that Bill Alexander made. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, you just like I've been for 8 years. I've had an unfinished 308 AR in my safe, and I feel like I've been teetering on. Should I just commit to 6.5 at this point?
I had a large frame 308 AR, and I built it, and I hated it, and I yanked out that barrel, and I put in a super heavy 243 barrel, and made a semi-auto varmint gun out of it.
So to go
somebody said they like the water hose. I like that.
To go wildly off topic, I'm just going to throw out the idea that, stemming from the Discord server here, was I really want to get a CZ527, the 7.62-39, with a BDC 7.62-39 reticle. That would be
there are plenty. There are plenty of them out there.
All right, keep going here. We're out of time. So new. Yeah. All right. Modified Horus.
Correct. Once again, so the military bought into the Horus thing.
Oh, here's a good question. I think
one for me.
I think this is going to come down to how much precision do you need it to have?
Yeah, it really. I think you have to really break it down to categories. I look at it. I'm putting everything in the context of like a fighting rifle. Again, if you give me an AR, it's a 500-meter bullet. It's a 500-meter gun. So, I can, there's only so much scope you need on there anyways, and then it's getting too ludicrous. Like I think a 1:8 is perfect magnification zone. So, we could have a whole argument on what's the right, power to have on a scope. Well, again, you got to try and match it to your platform.
So generally speaking, it depends on what you're shooting and where. But last time I was at the range with an AR, there was sufficient amount of wind that at 400 yards, I had a 4.6 milliradian of wind hold. Good luck doing that without dialing or without a tree reticle.
So this one's probably really quick. Was that the new Steiner people are griping about?
I don't know what people are griping about, so it's hard to say.
I don't know. I feel like that Steiner has been really popular. Like that's been
The
really
P4 Xi has been around forever. Steiner has a couple of new LPVOs, but they're not making too much impact for the moment.
All right, I'm not familiar with this. I assume this is where like you can come up with your ballistic data, send it to Loophole, and they'll spit you back turrets that match.
Pretty much, yeah. It will work at that one elevation with that one load. Yeah, it's
kind of nifty idea, though.
It's another terrible idea, almost as bad as a BDC reticle. So I couldn't resist. No, that's even worse idea than a BDC reticle.
Bad advice exists in forums. Not so much a question, but hey, I agree with this. I think forums are only one step up from gun shop lore.
I like it when people call me a FUD, and that really makes my day.
Well, no, you're talking about area15.com. What do you expect?
I had to. I didn't call that. I mean, honestly, ARFCOM's pretty bad. Depends on where you are. I've seen some way worse ones. All right, let's keep on going down. And we answered that. Good afternoon from Australia. Good afternoon. Good afternoon on Friday. All right, so I'm going to bring this one back up. So this was Echo 7 Foxtrot. I guess this was his answer a while back. Why would I use, I'm assuming, an MRAD? If you're still watching this one, would you mind like agreeing down up the chat? It'll pop up on the screen. You mean like this is why you would use an MRAD reticle, or why you would use a BDC reticle?
That's an argument for magnification as a whole. That's one more reason why red dots are like the way of the dodo. Let's go into a tangent. Dual optic carbines, red dot and an LPVO. That's the winning combination. It's not 1993.
See, Ilya and I had that conversation a couple of weeks ago based on what you said. Next time I gotta invite you to that conversation again. All right, ask Ash Hess what a Trigicon is. All right, y'all know the backstory on this one?
I don't.
Dude, what age? I don't. Funny. Does he like? Not like?
Not a clue. I'm doing a search on Ash Hess of Norfolk.
If it's Ash Hess, I mean, proof like he doesn't like anything. So I can't say.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, so he's a KAC, or at least he was some shooter. He's the guy who I know of as the one who wrote the Army Marksmanship Manual, the revised one a couple years ago that was a lot better.
Where is he? Oh, there's his LinkedIn. He's at Knights.
Primary.
Oh, I've seen him at Knights. I'm somewhat friendly with the guys at Knights. Okay.
All right, so Echo 7 said, yeah, that's why he likes MRAD, those low probability shots. All right, so BDC was founded upon the standards of G1.
Okay, you want me to address it, or you want to do it?
I'm guessing this is missing letters. This is a BDC reticle using G1 ballistics.
Well, he's talking about BC, ballistic coefficients.
Oh, got it.
Not BDC.
Got it. Ballistic coefficient.
So ballistics is a precise but somewhat empirical science, and when we're trying to figure out how to simulate how a projectile goes through an air, we figured out there are several different ballistic standards. G1 is an object of a particular shape, flat-based in this case, pointy thing. And when when a bullet has a ballistic coefficient that is G1, let's say 0.5, that means it's 0.5 times as efficient as that G1 standard. G7 is a different standard that looks a little bit more like a pointy boat tail bullet, right? So, and the number is a little bit different. If you have 0.1 G7 coefficient, that means this particular bullet is half as efficient as that G7 standards. That's what ballistic coefficient really means. How efficiently it flies through the air compared to this G something standard. There is also G2, G3, G5, G6. G1 and G7 are the ones we use the most.
All right, Chen has another one up here. There's a second follow-on to this one, but I think this kind of gets the meat of it. I don't have a lot to say here. I don't.
So, quick history of LPVOs in the military. I just happen to know somebody. That'd be me. So in 2015, I went to one of the first conferences where we demanded 1 to 6 scopes. In 2015, 1 to 6 LPVOs were the height of technology at the time. We wanted the Vortex Razor. That was 2015. Fast forward to 2019, and we're doing some dribble trials at Fort Bragg. And of course, what scope wins? The SIG 1-6. Not because it outperformed all the others, and I know one of the guys on the test committee, because it was third best price-wise. So performance, no. Third best price-wise. Now, I talked to an SF guy still active today. It's now 2022, and they have yet to receive their 1-6 scope still.
Really?
It's coming up on, you're not in the military, though. They're issued one. It's like, all right, we started the process in 2015 to get a 1-6 scope. It's almost 2022. 1-6 scopes, that's old technology. The new standards are 1-8. So they're already behind the times. The Marines, of all people, they went with the VCOG 1-8. They got their 1-8s. Now, there are some 1-10s in service. It has to do with military funding. SOCOM says we're going to get the 1-6 for this and that. Units have unit funds to buy scopes, and some other scopes have been bought that are in units. I know there's a lot of 1-10s there, but the SOCOM issue, the SOCOM big ones, here's your 1-6 for every SOCOM guy, still is yet to be issued. They're still waiting. That's what I can say about that.
So I've spent quite a lot of time at Fort Bragg in that armory room where they maintain and focus all those scopes, set them up with the clip-ons and all sort of stuff. Last time I was there, I didn't see any Tango 6s. The 6T is actually a decent scope, but for speed, Vortex is faster. The Razor Gen 2 that you wanted is faster, and then so is the Gen 3. But that having been said, for the money that they're charging, Tango 6T is a perfectly respectable design, but Matt, I like the size 6 a little bit more.
Guys wanted the Vortex Razor, and what do? We started the search in 2015, and we're gonna be coming up on 10 years before guys get a 1-6. By then, they'll have a 1-38 powered with built-in laser rangefinder and infrared, and SOCOM will finally issue out a 1-6. So
quite possibly,
that's procurement.
Maybe. I see you're feeling optimistic. As a guy who sells my day job, as a guy who sells stuff to the government, I feel for you.
When the Daniel Defense RIS-2 rail first came out, we purchased it and selected it around 2007. I did not get my first one till like 2012. That's how long procurement takes to get to all the guys. So one example.
Yeah. Military procurement is very special.
That one, but I was on the other side of government acquisition. It was a piece of software that we needed. And I remember I had to submit the paperwork, and it was in 2015 for version 15 for 2015. And by the time I left the military in 2017, it's still not been approved, and that version of software was now way out of date. You couldn't even and they weren't going to approve the latest version. They were going to approve the 2015 version.
Hell yeah.
Government acquisitions for you. All right, this will be a quick one. Iceman, I don't think that Steiner has that one, 1-6 or 1-8.
No, that reticle is new. It only exists in a 1-4 for now. It would do just fine in a 1-6 or 1-8. It's a perfectly reasonable design.
I don't think you could teach a jarhead MRADs. I mean, I'm all for inter-service rivalry. I'm not going to crap on Marines.
But they got 1-8s. Hey, good on them.
I don't know. So this is a tough one. I'm trying to figure out how to insult everyone in one sentence, and it's not coming to me. It'll come to me eventually.
Comes down to your skill level and what your goal is. Shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, keep on rolling down here. Drew, water hose. Never heard that before. I had not either. I might have to borrow that one.
I went through sniper school back in like 1998, 99 with the 308. Good God, I hate the ballistics and how 308 flies out to 1,000. It's dismal. I can't stand it.
Jeff, if you don't mind me asking, which part of the country do you live in?
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay, so you're somewhere not too far from Fort Bragg. See, where I live in New Mexico, my 308 is supersonic at 1,200 yards. It's great. Altitude.
Somebody's asked about the VCOG 1-6. It was great for 2015, totally out of date. It's too heavy. I have one, and for 3-gun, I use a damn Vortex Strike Eagle 1-8. I don't even, my VCOG sits on the shelf now, and I told war stories about it because it is the VCOG I took down range. But if I were, as a civilian now, I would not go with the VCOG. If I was a military dude, I'd only look at their 1-8. But there are better options out there. It's overbuilt for reliability and durability. They can take a beating, but that price point and all that weight and durability is not needed for the average shooter at all. A normal type Vortex or other mid-range, you don't have to go high end. I like the Vortex PST line. I think it's great. Mid-range price scopes, they can take a beating. And glass quality, glass quality is phenomenal even on your mid-range, scopes.
I think we've had that conversation before where it's like, are we more and more, it seems like things you get today for a mid-range price point would be thousands 10 years ago.
I mean, I have a Vortex Strike Eagle 1-8. I bought it when it first came out. I played with one at a gun shop like 2 months ago. I was amazed how much better it is. It's like a whole new scope just because mine was like, 2014, whenever it came out.
It's nobody. The OEM keeps on changing it. It's like on version 8 at this point.
Yeah, the glass quality is phenomenal. It's like I had a first-gen Vortex 1-4 when it first came out. And it was a piece of crap compared to any bottom of the line scope now. Horrible, it was wavy, distorted. Didn't know it at the time, but yeah.
So I'll vouch. I mean, I bought the Strike Eagle 5-25 for the rimfire rifle at first. I was very happy with it. I mean, the Cronus is a lot better, but I was pretty happy with that Strike Eagle. So yeah, Steiner 1-8 with a 45 offset is the favorite combination. This goes to you, Jeff.
Modern combat setup. That's how you'd be rocking nowadays. If you're going to harm's way, you're prepared for the unknown.
If I'm going to harm's way, I'm calling Jeff and hiding in the basement.
All right. Let's see a couple more in here. We're going to run over time a little bit. Sorry about that. Hopefully everybody's still sticking with it.
All right, I have that scope. You want me to address it?
Sure, go for it.
I just did a video on that scope. So mine sits on an AR-15. Look, the high magnification is always get compromised by small objective lenses. If you don't need the 1 power, don't do a low power variable. That's basically it. Gen 3 is a great general purpose design for a fighting gun because it's really good on 1 power and everything in between. And when you happen to have the lighting conditions and the steady position, 10 power is great. It's usable. I've shot it past 1,000 yards during the day. As the light gets low, you have to dial it down. If on a backup sniper rifle, it makes no sense. It was designed as a DMR scope. Designated marksman rifle, something that in principle can be called upon from everything from this far to way out there. If your SWAT sniper rifle is not used for arm's length shooting, it doesn't need to have a low power variable on it.
Works for me. Thought this one was funny. 7-year-old scope. So I can't say again. Okay, what I used to do didn't use scopes and optics, but living in central.
Oh, you used optics all the time.
I did receive a probably 30-year-old hand-me-down snow parka when I was stationed in Montana.
I was talking about satellite cameras that were doing the aiming for you. I used to work on those.
I don't talk about that.
It's okay. It's the internet. Google knows everything.
All right, keep going down. So this one popped up. So this is an interesting conversation, I think. Thanks, Dave, for asking this one on a main battle rifle, but really I want to focus on this intermediate range, the 3 to 15 one, because I've seen a lot of discussion lately about is that medium range variable, so medium power variable paired with an offset red dot, is that a viable option?
Based on the caliber. I mean, if for 5.56, that's too much, too long, too goofy. But again, as soon as you step up to a bigger, better performing bullet that has a better long range, yeah, why not? I wish the military, I don't know anything about the new 6.8. I was in SF when the first gen 6.8 tried to get pushed on us. This newer 6.8 with, these plastic cartridges, everything they're playing around with. So it'd be a whole nother 6.8. So I can't talk to that. But, I am familiar with like 6.5 Grendel and some other stuff. So that's, it's a good 600 meter bullet. So yeah, 1 to 8 or, 1 to 6 may not be the right solution. 3 to 15 might be the way to go. Again, if you're rocking a red dot, you don't need that 1 power anyways. The 1 power is kind of a backup. When I was in Afghanistan, my last tour, my VCOG stayed on 6 power the entire time. If something popped up closer, I was going to rely on my red dot. Also, I did use I never used the little illuminator on my VCOG. The black Stadia, black horseshoe was fine the whole time. I never put on the illumination.
So one question, Jeff, that popped in my mind, because after we had our interview and I published that episode, I actually had somebody ask me in an email about what is your thought on that what is that transition range where you would say I'm switching to red dot? I was estimating probably inside 100 yards, but I thought your opinion might be different.
Yeah, if anything appears under 100, then I'd turn the gun over and give him the red dot. And my red dot, the height above bore is closer to it. I had a 200 meter zero on my red dot, so really I could shoot out 200 yards, no problem with that red dot. But it's Afghanistan. Afghanistan's a long range fight. They use distance and terrain. If you're going to go to, like, say, Nigeria, where last time SF took casualties, that's a whole other fight. That's a war maneuver. So my setup in Afghanistan might completely fail me in that area. I'd have to look at the battlefield, how they're operating. We know, like in Africa, they maneuver. So you might maybe going back to a red dot's an answer. I don't know. But I would just say going into the unknown, I'd want both on the gun. And then as we determine how the enemy fights, I would, modify my gun appropriately to match the situation. Maybe I won't have to change it at all. Who knows?
So I want to, lest I open a whole nother can of worms and rabbit hole, when you say they maneuver, I want to be clear. What does that mean?
So Afghanistan, they'll use terrain and distance. So you have to go over we can't get to them because they're going to, mass themselves with this hellacious terrain between you and them. In Iraq, they used to do the same thing in the urban areas. They'd only shoot at you if there was like a culvert or something in between where we couldn't actually physically get to them. So they could point, shoot at us, light us up, and then, get out of there. In Africa, it's true light infantry maneuver. So they're going to open up on you 100 or 200 yards away, and then they're going to aggressively bound and maneuver to try and outflank you just as fast as we're trained to try and outflank them. So instead of using that terrain and distance as their friend, they're going to maneuver. And if you look at that unfortunate incident in Nigeria, I think it's been 3 years now, where we lost the 3 SF guys. I mean, they were drawn into basically a baited ambush fight. I don't want to go off too much of a tangent, but the SF guys on the ground did the same thing I would have done. They immediately tried to flank the enemy. Problem was the enemy had a larger flanking force against them, and they were not prepared for this aggressive movement because we were kind of lulled into the 15, 20 years or so of fighting in Afghanistan. So you have to learn a whole new way of tactics on the ground. If they called me back to have active duty right now and said, hey, you're going to go into Syria. Heck, I don't know how they fight in Syria. I'd have to really stop and look and see how the enemy acts and base my setup off of how the enemy's fighting.
Thanks. I know, not to go wild off topic, but I
know, it's way out there. We're going off into Quasar 7.
All right, I thought this was a good, valid question. I have another one here from Chen too, but I'm not a combat vet, so I can't argue this one, but my perception is that it can be done.
I fell on my VCOG and I dented the focusing reticle. The gun held 0. You could beat somebody to death with it, and that's what I paid for when I wanted the VCOG. I was looking for that with the VCOG. Now, you take my Strike Eagle 1-8, I'm 6'3", and I fall face first on it on concrete, it's probably not going to make it. It's at least not going to be able to hold 0. So you do get what you paid for.
So with low power variables, we have the best reliability statistics probably in the Razor Gen 2 1-6. And they've been strikingly well built. The difference between most commercially available low power variables and the VCOG is it really depends what mount you put your LPVO in. The VCOG is an integrated mount. With conventional low power variables, if you're using a high quality mount, they are exceptionally robust to the point where if you're going to be landing on shit, the scope going haywire is not your biggest problem. The scope cracking a couple of ribs on you, that may be a bigger problem. Now, to Jeff's point, not all low-power variables are built equal, right? I mean, through 3-gun and a bunch of other things, some scopes have a deserved reputation for being somewhat fragile. Some work well. The biggest differentiator in terms of keeping your point of aim seems to be lateral impact. on the objective lens. And that really comes down to what kind of mount you use and how you put the scope in the mount.
I have no opinion on that one. So we'll move on.
That was not an opinion. I've seen the statistics.
Fair enough. All right. On Shen, S&B 856 for low light. I think, in my opinion, uninformed, because I'm a dumb Air Force guy. Anything with a 56 millimeter objective is probably pretty good in low light.
And we have an Air Force guy who understands millimeters now. That's a first. Oh, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. So the traditional European fixed power scopes are very, very good in low light. There is an interesting point here. So I've seen a lot of people after that conversation, Matt, we had about low power variables with offset red dots. I'd like to set up an offset red dot with this scope, that scope. There's a million different ways to set up the red dot, depending on how you rotate your rifle, where your eye ends up. It seems to be a little bit different for different guns, for different people. With scopes that have very large objectives, like a 56 millimeter, it is entirely possible that you will be a little bit limited in how you get that red dot set up. Shouldn't be, but it's possible, and I've seen it. So if you're planning to be setting up an offset red dot, I would look at it a little bit, experiment a little bit. You may not want to go to the largest objective possible. The compromise is somewhere in the 40-42 millimeter range.
I think this is, I would say it's the last one. Red versus green illumination. I tend towards green, but I can't even tell you why. I think it stands out to me better.
Do I want me to tell you why, or you're okay not knowing?
You're the expert. You tell me.
No, it's just human perception. You're more sensitive to green, but honestly, a lot depends on where you live. If you're with a lot of in terrain with a lot of green backgrounds, red's going to be a little better. If you have astigmatism, green is going to look a little cleaner than red. That's usually how human eye works. But amber will actually tolerate your astigmatism better than most. In terms of sensitivity, green will stand out the best, but against the green background, it's not ideal.
I'm trying to show, because this is the LED one. Like the green on this thing is like nuclear bright. Really
so for the record, this standard P4 oxide is also a green reticle. So I've been messing with it. It actually works really nicely.
I think so much that depends on the scope, like and how high illumination. Like my Elcan's red, but it's not very bright.
Correct. Your 4X Elcan? Yeah. Even in the daylight mode with a little crosshair illuminated?
I mean, I can see it. I can see that it's illuminated. But like this one, if I turn this up to 6 in full, I actually still can't look at it. I have to turn it down from that. The Elcan, it's plenty bright for like indoors, and I use it outdoors, and it helps stand out. But it's not like draw my eye to it. Right?
How interesting! Did you try different? Did you try good quality battery? Because I can use a bin naming concept with mine. It's bright enough for broad daylight and Nevada desert.
Oh, then maybe I need to go check it out. But yeah, I mean, I'll ask you what batteries you use for. I think I got some Duracells. The lithium ones.
That should be fine. Just swap out the fresh battery.
And here we go. Next one.
That's a good question.
Jeff, what do you think?
Will MPVOs become more with military exertion, larger bullet? What will the effect of reticle designs? Yeah, I do not know. I mean, this whole next generation rifle bullet combination the military is trying to really crank out here in the next 2 years is going to be interesting to see. So I honestly, I do not know. My answer would be I do not know.
I think there's probably going to always be a balance here about weight.
There's not much balance there because typical 3 to 15 scope will weigh about as much as a low power variable. Getting one power to work right actually requires a lot of glass. Low power variables tend to be heavy. Will we see a mid power variable scope instead of LPVOs? Presumably not anytime soon. Partly because of what Jeff alluded to earlier, how rapidly military procurement and selection moves. I mean, I'm gonna be retired drinking orange juice in Florida before they figure out how to use low power variables. But another reason is that now that we have 1 to 10 designs and stuff like that, the need for a medium power variable is sort of diminishing because we may have a more powerful bullet, more powerful cartridge, right? It's going to be a little bit better at long range, but by and large, what you're shooting at hasn't changed that much. The new cartridge will give you more flexibility in different terrains. It doesn't necessarily mean you're looking for more magnifications. We'll see a lot of 1:8 and 1:10s. We'll see 1:10 by 28. We'll probably see 1:10 scopes with about 30mm objectives. That's probably the practical limit for now, where you can take a low power variable design without serious sacrifices. And that will give you strikingly better exit pupil and 10 power. And I think we'll stop there for a while.
I think this is the last question. FFP versus SF. Funny, I was just reviewing the article I wrote on this one, and I think I've come around on this. Generally, I would say first focal plane most of the time, with the caveats being I probably wouldn't sacrifice other things like durability and optical clarity for the sake of getting first focal plane, especially in the low power variable. That's my thought. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't know how, you're right, but I just can't come out and say it. No, it depends on the magnification range. Once you go to up to above 1:6, 1:8, 1:10, if you can spend some money, front focal plane scopes will have a little bit of an advantage. Because what happens with the 1:6, like Jeff was saying, you're sitting mostly on 1 or on 6. Once you go up to high magnifications, exit pupil gets a little smaller. You'll find yourself in intermediate magnifications a good bit. And people are doing that. I see people with low power variables on intermediate magnifications more and more. If you do that, you want your reticle holds, wind holds, lead holds, and stuff to be accurate. Front focal plane is a little bit better if you can solve the problem of visibility on low power. It's solvable, but it costs money.
Jeff, what do you think?
If your single focal plane has a good reticle and mainly a good red dot to focus in on, I'm faster up close with a single focal plane. Even though you think because it's busy, it's all be in your way, but dialing down some of these low power variable optics that are front focal, when you shrink them down, sometimes I don't like the end result of what that reticle looks like. I know the Christmas trees, the BDC is supposed to disappear in some of them. So they're just distracting me. Even though single focal plane, it's all right, they'd be distracting. But I think I'm so used to, and this is just me, starting out with the ACOG, 15 years ago now, and LCANs. I mean, I was in SF when the ACOG first came to SF before it went big Army. SF picked it up in 1997. I joined SF in 98. So I'm used to looking at that, that BDC type reticle right in my face the whole time. So that's probably just a personal preference thing. I think on paper, and probably more people will agree that a front focal plane is the way to go.
Well, if the reticle is designed well, you're absolutely correct. Reticle design is key here. It's not such straightforward, but I mean, we have several designs now that are clearly workable. So it's getting there. It's converging on something good.
This will be the last question. You try to piggyback armor on an ACOG, but tilting it. So I have not. I mean, I've not done this. I've been hearing about this, but I've never done it.
I don't know. I'd have to play with it, so I can't say offset outright. One reason why I don't like piggyback optics is you have to lift your chin up and you lose your cheek to stock. At least when you roll the gun over, it's still there. If you have to take your cheek to stock off to find this, I'm going to say no. But if it works out where you maintain contact, I don't know, maybe it works out. But, an offset mount, they're like $100 right now for a 45-degree offset. And you roll the gun, and it's right there, And it's a lower height above bore. It's lower than a primary red dot. You throw your aim point on there, you have, 2.5 inches height above bore, 2.7 inches. Most 45 offset mounts, the height above bore is 1.7 inches. So it's even better for up close. Less height above bore to worry about. Less of a hole when you shoot somebody in the face.
I am not entirely sure about this business of using your left eye to look through this and how you roll it. I haven't tried it. I probably should experiment with a little bit. Offhand, switching eyes while trying to do something is not a great idea.
I was thinking about if I was doing this, and I haven't, but if I was doing this, I feel like my right eye dominance would mess with me a lot on this one.
It does.
I'm left eye dominant. What do I do?
So I shoot both righty and lefty, right? And I have guns set up for both because I can and because it's fun. I cannot shoot with the left eye while keeping the right eye open. I have to shoot lefty. I have to close my right eye. So I don't know. So you're switching from the main optic to a red dot while trying to figure out which eye to blink with. I don't know. I'm not sure I like that.
I do give him credit for using the term poo-poos because I use it a lot when talking about gear and equipment if somebody poo-poos something. So I'll agree with him on that.
All right, that gets us to the last question. So I want to thank you all for coming in to hang out. I thought this was a good time. How about you guys? Don't answer that if you didn't like it. But thank you all, Jeff, Ilya, for coming on. And also, this is kind of an interesting event because Ilya and I were doing a pairs event. So even though this is an Everyday Marksman live stream, was also running on Ilya's channel. And I can see a lot of the chat was actually coming off of Ilya's group as well. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to do the typical YouTube thing. Please consider subscribing to my channel as well, Everyday Marksman. And also come by the website, everydaymarksman.co, where it's all about tactical skills for tactical skills for a more adventurous life. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. So I thought this was a good conversation about bullet drop compensating versus more MRAD based. I think there's some good arguments on both sides. I'm curious what the audience thinks. If you all watched that one, if you kind of put in the chat what you thought is going forward, what you think the advice is going to be. I'll say for mine, I'm probably going to go MRAD just because, in my opinion, I think there's probably more room to grow into that. BDC is probably faster to learn, and it's definitely going to be easier for new people. But I think long term, I'll probably start thinking more
MRAD. Chad, so let's do this. I'm going to do a live cast. I'm traveling next week. I'm going to do a live cast from my hotel room. That will be a good time to talk about nerdy stuff. I'll walk you through different reticle eliminations, and we'll go from there. How about that? I think Matt and Jeff will fall asleep if I go into diffractive reticles. Definitely Matt, Air Force guy, takes a lot of naps.
We have no attention span.
I'm retired. I take naps all the time.
But anyhow, thank you guys. It was a blast. Jeff, thank you for being a good sport. I really do appreciate it.
All right. I expect 16,000 scopes in the mail now.
I can go on AliExpress and get 16,000 scopes for $8. Nothing to it. But anyhow, next time I'm in North Carolina, I'll give you a ping. If I'm somewhere in your area, I'll take you out for a beer.
Definitely, that's what I'm talking about.
Excellent.
All right. And if y'all are in Northern Virginia, I'll do the same.
Well, I will actually be there. There, I'm quite a bit. I spend a lot of time at Night Vision Labs. It's not that far from you. Besides, Virginia now is almost a civilized state after last election, so it's not that scary to go there.
Almost. So looking at the chat, it's come in. It does seem like MRAD is the winner for this one, for this round. So, well,
see, there's an advantage.
Be the winner, but I'm checking all these names here. I don't remember seeing any of these dudes stacked up behind me like my last time in Helmand Province backing me up. So I'm for BDC.
Yeah, they should tell you that talking faster and louder has certain advantages.
All right, and then with that, we will go ahead and end this one tonight. Thank you again, Ilya and Jeff, for coming on. And thank you to everybody who's here in the watching, participating in the chat. And of course, this will be up on the channel. And I'm going to turn this into a podcast episode for everybody who wants to catch that one later after a little bit of editing. So thank you, everybody, and have a great night.